This meeting is being recorded.
Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today I'm proud to bring you Living Theurgy. We have with us today Brandy Williams, we have Jean-Louis de Biasi, we have Apollonius, and we have Tony Mierzwicki. Greetings and welcome, everyone.
Greetings. Good to see you all.
Brandy wonderfully put together a list of awesome questions for our conversation today. So I'll be reading those as we go along. And before we start that, though, does anybody have anything new that they'd like to share?
I guess Brandy has something new to share.
Yeah,
Yes.
that is on topic. For the love of the gods, the history and modern practice of theurgy, our pagan inheritance. That's a book that Llewellyn published in 2016, and it was out of print in 2018. So I am reissuing it. I have a new press, Mnemosyne Press, and the first thing that we're doing as a press is to issue the book. So it's sort of a motivation both to get the book out and also to get a press together, which is something I've been looking at for a number of years. So I'm very excited by the project. My friend, Dr. Megan Rose, poked me. She said, I'm doing a class on Tuesday and I'm recommending your book and it is not available. Are you going to bring that book out? And I said, okay. So I took January to actually finally finish doing the setup projects. So we'll issue that on February 1st. It's Mnemosyne Press, so that's spelled M-N-E-S-O-Y-N-E. Mnemosyne Press. Mnemosyne is the goddess of memory. If you've seen the Matrix Resurrections, they have a ship whose name is Mnemosyne. So I don't care how you say it, if you say it Mnemosyne or Mnemosyne, but that's the name of the press.
Awesome. Do you have a website for the press yet?
Yep, mnemosynepress.com. Memory is the mother of inspiration, because memory, of course, is the mother of the Muses. And I think that that is on topic to the questions that I have for us too.
I will definitely post links to Mnemosyne Press, and I wish you the greatest of success with it. I must say that your book, For the Love of the Gods, is what caused this entire forum that we have, because I loved the book so much. I started looking at what other people were doing with theurgy, and that led to our eventually having a forum and then continuing this forum now for years. We've been talking. So thank you very much. And the book should be out there. It's an awesome book.
Well, thank you. And I'm really glad to have it back in print. I think everybody here, Hercules, who's a Llewellyn writer, has books on theurgy, and they're all in print. Yeah. So it's really nice to bring it back out in print. Yeah.
When I was teaching theurgy classes out in northwestern New Jersey, all of your books were required reading.
Excellent.
And then the pandemic put a halt on that for a while. So when I pick it up again, they will be required reading once more.
And they'll be in print.
Tony, do you have anything new that you'd like to share? Tony just published a blog and I put a link to it. Would you like to tell us about that?
I basically reviewed Jean-Louis' book.
Thank you.
So I really enjoyed it. It's pretty well the same format as last year's one. So I was able to use much of the review that I produced last year. But I think that you're really onto something absolutely incredible, the way that you're talking about linking the civic calendar with a more astronomically based calendar based around the lunar months. And I can imagine it taking off in a big way and a lot of people trying it out. And it was especially nice to see a couple of essays in there by our very own Apollonius. So that's a nice bonus.
Thank you.
What's the name?
I can comment a little bit and add something to it. Yeah, first, thank you for the review and thank you for Apollonius for the paper inside. This almanac has been published. This is the third one. We are already working for the next one, obviously. But in the same time, what we are doing, because many people were interested, on theurgyuniversity.org, what we do is to take each day, and for people that are part of the community, every day there is a daily journal. And in the daily journal, you have everything related to the day, for example, the deities, the celebrations, the remembrance, and so on. But what you do not have in the book are all the comments related to the deities and the celebrations. So we add at least several pages every day with quotations on which you can meditate. So you have several readings linked to deities, sometimes links, sometimes videos, historic, symbolic, and so on. So I invite everyone to visit theurgyuniversity.org and check what we are doing with the daily journal, with the community that is growing every day. So this is really, and everyone, of course, can comment every day on the post, adding a few things, comments, practices, and so on. So this is something that is the same as the almanac without the papers and articles, but with anything around the celebrations of the day or the deacons. Or I give you an example. We just switched from one astrological sign to another one. So we had several posts linked to the new sign with paintings, symbolic comments, and so on. So if you are interested, just visit theurgyuniversity.org, and this is available in English, obviously. This is the main part, but there are a lot of courses in French, Portuguese, soon Spanish, and Russian. So I invite everyone to visit it. Thank you again.
Thank you. Are you continuing with the email version of the almanac?
No, this
No.
is replaced by with the sendings, daily sendings within the community. Because with the email, it was not possible to comment, to participate, to grow. In this case, we can, everyone can participate every day. And so we added, as I said, quotations from philosophers, and yeah, mainly philosophers. Right now, this is Marcus Aurelius for the month. Next month, it will be quotations from Epicurus, and so on. So every day, someone has a new quotation, and they can speak about, comment, meditate, beside the calendar itself.
I like how Theurgy University is evolving, and it's growing and it's changing right before our eyes. It's an awesome thing you've done.
Yeah, I can remind to everyone the address in the chat. Thank you.
Okay. And last but not least, Apollonius, so your book is coming out. The date is approaching. Anything to report on that front, or anything else?
Well, I just finished editing the page proofs yesterday, so that was an important milestone for me.
Yeah.
Not so visible, but it'll be visible in the final product. Yeah, not much else to report. Between editing stints on my manuscript, I wrote a short article, largely based on stuff I'd written before, on Kronos and Rhea, from the standpoint of basically Orphism. And you probably know about it. The Bibliotheca Alexandrinus, I believe it's called,
Yes.
publishes these devotional volumes, and I've contributed to a number of them, and they're you know, to either for a particular god, or in this case for the Titans. And so I've contributed this article to the forthcoming book, which I think is supposed to be out in a month or two, on the Titans. So it's kind of interesting. It's, you know, people don't think about the Titans so much as as the Olympian gods, but anyway, so that was something I had a writing urge, and the manuscript for the Plethone book was done, so I had to write something else, and so I put that article together.
If it's coming out, if you provide a link, I'll gladly share it.
Okay, sure, that's a good idea.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I wish you all success with these new projects. They're awesome, and our community will greatly benefit by having them out there. Since we're all joined together, not only on this panel, but now on a writing adventure, we're going to focus on our writing process in today's panel. And I'll go around, I guess, clockwise, and we'll start with Brandy, and we'll just go around. How do you pick a topic when you decide to write?
We all took a crack at this, I think, at our last gathering, and something that struck me was that we all had a relationship to the Muses. I was talking about Mnemosyne or Mnemosyne. How did you say it, Hercules?
Mnemosyne.
Mnemosyne. How Apollonius, how would you say Mnemosyne?
Mnemosyne, more of an umlauted U for the
Mnemosyne. Okay, so the mother, the memory.
Mnemosyne, I would say,
Yeah.
for the more classical pronunciation, but yeah. I'm flipping back and forth sometimes because I've been working on Plethone, and he's a Byzantine, and so he pronounced Greek like modern Greek. And but my habit is more the classical pronunciation. So now I'm kind of all mixed up.
So I don't know where I got my pronunciation. It seems to be different from either of those. The goddess of memory is the mother of the Muses, and all of us talked about being inspired. I kind of was impressed by that what starts out, you said, Apollonius, that you had an impulse to write, and I've been writing since I was 5. And so I just have this, it's sort of how I am in the world. My primary thing is that I'm a writer. And so I'm always writing, I'm always thinking about stuff. And then, and I make notes. And sometimes it can be 10 years or 20 years before something has enough of a head of steam that I actually sit down and shape it. And so that was one of the reasons I was kind of interested in talking about it. How do we all go about these processes? But the actual process is I think about something, or I'm thinking before I go to sleep. And when I wake up, I have a voice in my head that is giving me dictation. And I need to have time to sit at my computer and write that dictation. If I don't get that time, I lose the thread. So there's something about that connection to inspiration. I think that's really central to my process. And then the topics, I suppose, because I'm pagan, and I started being pagan when I was 16. It's something that sort of focused what my writing was about, because we're building out, recreating and building out these new understandings in the world. So that's what's captured my attention.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Brandy? No. Okay. Tony.
How do I pick a topic? It has to be something I'm passionate about. So it has to be something that I've always been passionate about, or perhaps it can be something that someone suggests to me and I find myself developing a passion for it. Also, if I'm asked to write something, a passion can come from that. But unless you have a passion for a particular topic, if you're not swayed by it, then your writing won't sway anyone else. That's what I find anyway.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Tony? Onwards, Apollonius.
Yeah, I usually, my writing projects usually begin with things I'm trying to find out for myself. So especially my pagan-oriented writing projects, it's something I wanted to know. How did the ancient Greeks do divination, for example? Or, what, in the case of the Pythagorean tarot, what if Pythagoras designed a tarot deck, what would it look like, and so forth. And so I do a lot of the research just for my own purposes. Of course, I make lots of notes and stuff like that. And then usually I feel like, well, this is other people might want to know this too. And so I then go and write an article or a web page or a book. The Oracles of Apollo began many years ago when I was looking for a divination system that I could use and that also was in the Greek tradition. And I found out about the alphabet oracle, and I had to, unfortunately, it was in Greek, and there was a German translation, if I recall, but basically I had to translate it to be able to use it, and and so I put that out on the web, and then later expanded it greatly to become the book. So a lot of my projects begin that way, and it kind of ties in with what Tony was saying. It's something I'm passionate about, often for my own use, or it's something I think is really interesting and just people should know about this. I mean, that's really what I got. Part of how I got writing about theurgy too, is I thought, well, this is great. This is, our sort of a Western tradition of this kind of mystical interaction with the gods and everything like that. And a lot of people don't know about it. So I felt that I should, this is really interesting. Listen to this. And so eventually that, maybe I'd talk about the stuff in some talks or some classes, and then eventually put it down in writing. I have, on some cases, talking about inspiration, there have been cases where I knew I wanted to write about something, and where I have done a formal theurgical operation, where I will contact some particular deity, either that I think is relevant to the topic, or maybe that has contacted me, and I will, basically say, what should I say about this? Should I talk about this? Should I talk about that? Basically have a discussion with the deity about what should I do? How should I organize it? What should I talk about? What should I leave out, and so forth. And so that's a very direct sort of inspiration that I sometimes, usually when I'm having trouble getting my hands around the topic and deciding what to do with it, that I'll do that. But like Brandy, I tend to, it doesn't keep me awake, fortunately, but I tend to think about big questions, I guess, before I go to sleep. And I do often then have insights when I wake up in the morning, and I always make sure to write them down as quickly as I can. And I use all sorts of, note-taking apps and stuff like that besides paper. But yeah, I think it's important to capture the inspiration, but also to be able to go out and seek it as well, if it's not coming.
Thank you very much. That was very helpful. And anybody have any questions for Apollonius?
I just want to say something. I think Apollonius probably started the contemporary practice of theurgy. People were talking, scholars were talking, and still talk, but it was his websites in the late 90s that got people to look at it and say, wait, this is not just something that academics talk about, but something that we can actually do. And so it's incredible, and I'm so happy to have you on this forum, and it's such a great resource. And I think Jean-Louis might talk about that too, because I know that Theorem Solus had been practicing theurgy, but in terms of like making it popular, so all of us are writing about theurgy, we owe that to Apollonius. So I wanted to say thank you.
Oh, well,
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Greatly honored that you're here. Jean-Louis?
About writings, many things to say, yeah. First, about the choice of the topics. Usually I have too much. I have a lot of topics. I have a kind of notebook with titles and let's say 20, 30, I don't know. I want to write about on several topics: Freemasonry, theurgy, psychic powers, and so on. So after that, I am trying to select the most appropriate right now, or the one that excite the, yes, with which I am very excited at the moment. So sometimes this is a good idea, but not right now, maybe in a couple of years or something. So the challenge is to choose one in the middle of the 20 or 30 topics I have or subjects. Sometimes this is yoga, sometimes, I don't know. After that, usually I talk with, if this is in English, I talk with Llewellyn, and I send several subjects, and they said, this one, no, this one, not now, later, this one, yes, right now is good. And so from this choice, I build a synopsis and I send the synopsis. They say, okay, usually okay, because they already shared with me their interest, and I start the work. And usually I am always late because I am working on several other things like the Hercules, the Kabbalist Corner, and my own research or travels and so on. So I am always late. I am trying to not be. I am always swearing that I will not, but the reality is that I am very close to the deadline and sometimes a little after. So what I do during this time, I worked, yes. Usually I do research, so on internet, books, archaeology, museums, and so on. So a lot of things, but almost not writing, just finding things all around, trying to build a web of things, connections, and so on. And when eventually I have no choice but writing, I say, okay, now I have no choice. So let's say that in January or the following month, I do nothing but just writing. And during a month or 2 or 3 or 4, I do almost nothing but writing. And so I have pain everywhere because I am always on the computer writing as a crazy one. And the only break I have are because I am I'm stuck. I don't know how to express what I have to say. So my solution that works for me is workout, hiking. And when I am doing both, and mainly hiking, everything becomes easy because I can breathe. I am in the middle of the mountain or the desert and so on, nobody around. And just the fact to walk in the middle of nothing, breathing, even not meditating or anything, just allowing the body to move without thinking. And the thoughts are coming while I am walking. And when I come back, easy. I can find the connections, I can find everything that was missing. And sometimes this is difficult to write, just to express what I have to say. And usually when I am writing, I am not using anything around, like no music, silence, nothing. It disturbs me. But when I have an issue, when I cannot really train for hours to express and I cannot, what I am using are recordings of natural sounds. Not music, because this is sometimes, but this is so related to what I have to write. Sometimes it works, sometimes not. But natural sounds, very often it works. And my sounds, most of the time for writing, are winds. Winds that are blowing on the snow or in the mountains and so on, recordings like that. They are helping me to focus on something. So usually this is a process. But what I like, and everyone knows that, when you are working on a topic and when we are working on magical writings or theurgic writings, sometimes, no, not sometimes, very often, you have more than what you know, because things are coming to you. You are working about something, you are writing about something, a specific topic, but connections are giving you more than you want. And something you cannot plan in the beginning, something you discover in a museum, someone you don't know send you a photo, an artifact, something that is creating a new connection. And the book at the end is more than you expect at the beginning, because it grows as you go. And sometimes, and I am sure you know that, the book itself starts to become an entity independent of you. So the book has its own request, its own way to organize itself. So you channel something, but in the same time, you are a kind of medium, so you control, but not always. And the connections that help you to go through the book and to finalize something is a magical work, is a theurgic work. Maybe this is not the same thing in a novel or anything, but for our kind of writings, it works in its way. And I am not talking about doing a ritual to finalize the book. I'm just talking about the book growing and developing a kind of soul, a kind of a spirit that starts to exist. And at the end, your book is finalized, but already alive. So the publisher, at the end, is doing very easy work because you did everything. In fact, you animated the book as some people in the past animated statues. And you have a soul that is going through the book. And I like this process. So the last thing I want to share is, for me, this is, I am sure, different from you, because for several books, more than 10, I don't remember how many, but I was published in French first. So I was writing in French. Then I moved in North America and in Canada and after in the US. And I started progressively to write in English. I have someone who is proofreading different people, but the work, I am writing in English. And when I write, and when I started to write in English, my way to see the world and to explain the world changed. And I started to explain things and to think about these topics in a different way. And it was very interesting to see when you are using a new language, this is not just learning a language. You are not adopting a new mindset, but you are walking a little bit closer to a universal mind, because you are not just in English, you are not anymore in French, you are thinking to readers that can read your book from anywhere. And it was not obvious when I was writing in French. I realized after that I was writing for French readers. Now I write in English, but I am writing for anyone, not just English speakers, readers. So it changed a lot, and I think this is a very good idea. Maybe you do that already, I don't know. but to think, what is the public? Someone living in Mongolia, is it possible for him to understand what I am talking about? Not just Australia or New Zealand or US, but everywhere. And our philosophy and theology is universal. So we should, I guess, have that in mind. We are talking for everyone. So this is what I want to share right now with you and everyone else who is listening.
Wow, that is deep and a lot. I haven't written a book yet. I'll get to me in a second. Does anybody have any questions for Jean-Louis?
I would just like to say, Jean-Louis, it's so impressive the work that you do. To be able to write in more than one language and to write as clearly as you do is just amazing. And I have so much respect for you. So thank you for doing the work. And that's a very profound observation about the work itself. I might get back to it when I come back to me, but that was a lovely idea that the work itself is animated by the writing. So thank you for that too.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Jean-Louis, I've got a question for you.
Yes.
Apart from the language barrier in dealing with people from other countries, it seems to me that people in other countries can think differently to us because of their culture, because of their upbringing, because of their various experiences. How do you bridge the gulf between us and people in cultures that are very, very different to us in order to make your teachings more accessible to them?
This is what I discovered when I was teaching philosophy in France. And I discovered that philosophy is universal. And when you have a philosophical theory that is too intellectual, that doesn't work. But if this is rooted in something you can experiment in your flesh, we have exactly the same physical body that anyone else on the planet, almost. So if we are talking about life experience, and not cultural, but life experience, this is the same. Fear, love, beauty, and so on. I saw that in the Rome series because we have students almost from everywhere, agriculture in Africa, China, Japan, and so on. And when they have a ritual to perform, and when we receive the reports, we see that most of the time, the effects are the same. And doesn't matter the culture. And this is really strange and fascinating in the same time. So when I am writing, what I am trying, really, this is a will to do that. It's not perfect, but I am trying to imagine that someone who doesn't know anything about me, anything about my French or American culture, can understand. So maybe sometimes I am wrong, but mainly it works. So if I am talking about something from the Mediterranean tradition, I am thinking all the time, they don't know anything about the Mediterranean tradition. They don't know anything about the background. They don't know anything about Christianity. They don't know anything about that. So every time I am trying to give a few things that are not deep, but few things that help them to understand easily what I am talking about. And I had the experience, because the magic of internet, to chat with people living in Mongolia, because I am interested by their music and so on. So I was talking with someone who was a teacher, another one who was a musician, and we shared a few writings. And it was quite easy for them to understand, not deep, the understanding, but enough to understand what I was talking about and asks me questions very relevant. So it was a communication very interesting. So this is what I'm trying to do. I'm not succeeded every time, but at least this is the goal.
It's interesting that you should bring up Mongolia because they're in the process of opening their doors to the West. There's even a Mongolian heavy metal band called The Who, spelt HU, where they play a fusion of traditional Mongolian instruments and heavy metal, and they're actually developing a bit of a following out in the
I
West.
love I love a lot this group.
Yeah, so the barriers are slowly coming down. We're starting to become one people, one planet,
Yeah. Yes.
rather than separate people.
If I may, I don't want to build one culture,
No.
because I love the idea to maintain our tradition, to explain our Mediterranean cultures, traditions, and so on, but to build bridges that allow everyone to communicate, to share ideas, to share history, and so on. I love that.
Yeah.
This is better. Not just one culture the same for everyone. I hate that.
And that's exactly what they do in interfaith work. Hercules has brought this up a number of times, where if you're trying to build bridges between your religious practices and someone else's religious practices, you look for commonalities rather than differences. And you're doing the same thing and bringing theurgy to people who have no background at all in Mediterranean spirituality. Sorry to hijack the conversation, but I was just
No. These
fascinated
were
by what you were saying.
important things, and so much came out of them that no apology needed. Does anyone have any other questions to ask Jean-Louis, or anything they'd like to say? Thank you. That was very rich and very profound and very helpful. I haven't published the book yet, but I've written extensively since I was a kid. Mostly nonfiction, but some fiction, and I used to design evaluation instruments and write short manuals too. So I have a wide range of writing experience. I can identify with what everyone offered. I have tons of notebooks. Anyone who's known me since childhood can tell you that I always have a notebook with me and several different color pens, and I'm always writing in the notebook. Ever since the computer became a tool, I do it in my email because, again, I have a really tough time using programs. Brandy's helped me out a few times with trying to get my Word documents and things, but I use my email, and I type things and I title them to find them and dig them up. And it's the same thing. Usually I'll write ideas about a particular thing that fascinates me or that my mind keeps coming to. And eventually I start configuring them. I start moving around the phrases to see what I can glean from what I'm doing. And then it's like, okay, I get this now. This is what I'd like to say. And then it's like, how do I want to say it? Like, for instance, right now, thinking about how I want to say what I'm going to say for the Pagan Almanac, and for also Apollonius's book. So those are churning in my head, and I'm playing with ideas, and then something will click, and then it's like, okay, I have a direction. I've jotted down a bunch of keywords. Now it's, to organize it in how much time and how much space I have till I need to give it in. I'm usually on time with deadlines, but sometimes I'm not. And I too, when I'm not, I try to, to be, but sometimes the muse is not there, the juices are not flowing, and then they'll suddenly come, and I'll be able to knock out the piece. Although I tend to generally focus on things that inspire me or things that I'm fascinated by or drawn to, I wrote for a lot of anthologies. I think I've been published in 19 anthologies in the past couple of years. And there it's basically, they have a topic, and they'll ask me if I have anything to say about it. And I'll look at the topic, and if I have something to say, it's like, okay, how many pages do you need? And, when do you need it? And I'll just start working on it if I have something to say. If I don't have anything to say, or if I'm not interested in it, I'll thank them for the offer, tell them to keep me in mind for future things, but I really have nothing to say about this. Since I was a child, I had like a movie in my head since childhood, and it plays when I close my eyes. And it's kind of, I call it my primal vision, and I published it very widely. It's on my website. But a lot of times when I'm writing, it's kind of like it's a piece of a puzzle to something bigger than I'm doing. And when I'm writing something, regardless of what it is or what the topic is, it's like I'll ask myself, how does it fit into this bigger puzzle? And the puzzle doesn't always make sense, until later, until there's enough pieces there. But some part of me is working on this puzzle. So I've learned to trust that and to respect it. And I enjoy writing. I love writing. I love inspiration. And I love expressing myself through the written medium. I don't do clay or drawing or other types of creative expression like I did when I was younger, but writing is something that I've had from the beginning and something I still hold on to. It's still very near and dear to me. Like Jean-Louis said, exercise is my main way of energizing myself and focusing on myself. I like lifting weights. So that's what I do, and I do it every day. And with me, everything is a theurgic act. So my writing, like you said, is a theurgic act. My exercise is a theurgic act. My life has been, for most of my life, an experiment in theurgy. And again, it's due to all of you that my eyes became open to what other people are doing, and I got a lot of insight, and it really helped shape, what I do. So I want to thank everybody. And thank you for your answers. The next question is research. How do you go about researching? And we'll start with Brandy.
I'm sorry. It's just I have been reading since I was 5, and I had a rule as a girl that when I went to the library, I could only take as many books home as I could physically carry. A rule which I discovered you can push by taking bags. And so I think one of my follow-on questions is, how do you stop researching? Do you ever stop researching? And so I forget, I think it was Apollonius, several of us said, I want to learn something, so I start learning it, and then I eventually write something about that. And so one of the real problems in my writing career is stopping researching, right? It's like, oh, hang on. And with the internet, it's become much worse. I mean, I used to have to go to the library and check books out. Now I can just stick it in my web browser and pull down whole book length, things on. So research is like what fuels the knowledge, and also is the trap that I can get really sucked down into. And I can compile huge amounts of detail about something that people just start glazing over, when I talk about it. So yeah. So what was how did we phrase the actual question, Hercules? You just said research, and I said everything.
Well, there were two questions that were related. How do you research? And then how hard is it to stop doing the research?
Yeah. They're the same question for me. Yeah.
Never stop doing research.
And there's the spoiler alert as well. She never stops doing the research.
Yeah. I lived within a mile of the University of Washington library, Suzzallo Library. Suzzallo was at that time an open stack. You could walk into the library with the library card and just go up to the book that you wanted and pull it down. So I knew the history stacks really well, and they were open until midnight. So I'd be sitting in my room reading about something, and I'd find a footnote that talked about something. I would get up 10 o'clock at night, get up, walk down to the library, and go pull that off the shelf, and with this sense of thrill that I am able to find the information, right? So I used to do a lot of work in the physical world in the library, and I used to have a lot of physical books, and I still do. But more and more, I'm moving online because you can get this stuff online. I had 4 filing cabinets, legal size filing cabinets, filled with Xeroxes from the library, and I've actually put them in storage because I've begun to pull down those papers, and so we have access to information now that I could only dream of 30 years ago, and it's amazing. How do I research? I think I ask a question and then I just start going. I try to find sources of information, and then they send me to more sources of information. I try to make sure that I hear lots of different points of view. This is really important. I think it's really important in these times to talk about, because we tend to look for things that harmonize with what we already believe, and then talk to other people who believe that. And it begins to be hard to chip away at that. We build these thought structures that we think are real real and true, and other people should know this because this is real and true. And when other people don't agree with us, then we start having arguments, right? And so it's really important to me to have more than one way of looking at something, to be able to see more than one point of view and say, oh, yeah, you know, maybe that's not it. Maybe I need to release this. I'm really attached to this idea, but I'm seeing there's a lot of disagreement about that, a lot of evidence that maybe that's not the way it went. So I think it's important to stay open to a lot of sources, to a diversity of sources. And I think I'm about to start talking about scholarship, so I probably shouldn't. What makes good scholarship, which is a great topic, but a different topic. And I just as people talked, I wanted to pick up a couple of things on what other people had said. Jean-Louis in particular talked about the work itself starting to talk to you. And I've talked about my friend, Dr. Megan Rose, who's written a book, Spirit Marriage. And her book, it's coming out in March, Inner Traditions.
Yes.
And she talks about the research methodology that she used to do the book. She did interviews, but she also talked about invoking the spirit of the book as itself an entity which entered into the work with her collaboratively. And I thought that was a very theurgic thought and a very interesting thought, and something that I think I'm probably going to do more as I build out my own projects. And then the idea of moving around, you sparked me to remember that when I get stuck, I walk, right? So I'm sitting, if I'm on a writing retreat and I'm just doing writing, you know, I've got a deadline, I've got 2 more weeks, I better get her done, right? I'm working on this, and I really get stuck. I get up and I walk around the block, and then it starts the thoughts moving again. So I love walking on the beach. Beaches are great. I think Jean-Louis for the same reason, because the waves, you hear the waves and you hear the wind, and you get in touch with the powers of nature. So I think that that's a really important thing, that you need to stay embodied. These are not thoughts floating out there in the ether. These are thoughts expressing themselves through our particular instruments. They're embodied thoughts. And so reminding ourselves that we have bodies are an important part of the process. All right.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask Brandy, or any comments they'd like to make on what Brandy said? Okay, onwards. This is the last question, because a couple of you have indicated that you need to leave at 10 o'clock, and I think it's already 1:45, so Eastern time. So Tony.
Like Brandy, I had access to a library. It was the Sydney University Library, and at the risk of dating myself, when I started doing research, we would use catalogs and index cards. So you would spend time going through the catalog, finding a few index cards. You'd have a notepad and a pen, much like Hercules would always carry. You jot down the Dewey Decimal numbers, and then you'd go off, you'd pick out the book. Then you'd be going through the book, picking out the bits that were important, going through the footnotes, then going through the bibliography, which would then lead you to other books. But it was a very long, laborious process. And it's so much easier now when you can Google information. There are books that you can download. For Greek gods in particular, there's a website called Theurgy, and I'm sure many people are familiar with it. It has scholarly information on the gods and the daemons, and heroes that can readily be accessed. So that is always a good starting point. I have a friend at my gym who is a professor of theology, and he said something to me which is very applicable to this discussion. And rather than talking about research, he talked about writing a book. And he said that a book is never finished. You basically pull the plug on it. And the reason for that is that if you look at the amount of research that you do, as opposed to the gains, it's a curve that pretty well levels off. So initially, you start getting great benefits from doing a lot of research, but then as time goes on, you start to get less and less, because so much of the material that you access, you've already come across in previous books. So the thing is, eventually you just have to pull the plug on a book. You realize if you spent 6 more months on it, it might be 1% better. So you start to think to yourself, well, should I devote another 6 months to it just to get like a 1% improvement? You realize it's not worth it. The other thing I was going to add is that when my dog was alive, I would sometimes walk on my own. And those are the times when I'd be channeling information. We would either go to a park or we'd go to the beach, and just being in nature would facilitate the channeling of information. I had a couple of friends who I'd walk with, but while you're walking with them, you're chatting. So I'm not really channeling anything, but just walking on my own with Anubis was an incredibly constructive experience, because it would enable me to get clarity on thoughts that I had, put things together. Because the thing is, research is just information, but that information then has to be applied. That's the difference between knowledge and wisdom. You have to apply that information, put it all together, organize it, and then present it in a form that it's meaningful, not just to yourself, but meaningful to your readers. So yeah, my experiences are very similar to Brandy's, I think.
Thank you, Tony. Does anyone have anything they'd like to ask or comment about what Tony shared? Okay, Apollonius.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what's been said. In fact, it's reminded me, thinking about it, that I work outside a lot of the time when the weather's good, and I often solve problems and get insights by just walking around. Fortunately, I live in a rural area, and so
Yeah,
I can just go out and walk. I've always had access to a good university research library, which used to be essential. You know, I tell younger people now, you know, how hard it used to be to get some of these books, you know, even academic books, you know, and you put in requests with book search forum organizations, you know, and if you're lucky, a year later, they say, well, we found a copy of this book for $250, and you know, or you got a Xerox copy or a mimeograph copy of a book or some article or something like that, if you were lucky, that you could barely read. And now all of this stuff is on the internet, and it's just literally a click away. So it's really just has transformed the way we do things. I wanted to mention that I'm a lifelong and dedicated outliner. So, and I you know, I used to do it on paper, and I use apps now to do it. And in fact, I sometimes outline things down to the topic sentence level. So each low-level item in the outline is the topic sentence of a paragraph, and then you can actually fill in the paragraph in the notes, and then export the thing as a text document, and you've got sort of a first draft that way. But I also wanted to show when I can't organize things that well, you know, I'm just, there's a mass of stuff and I'm trying to just kind of get my hands around it. I did this on the Pythagorean Tarot, and I use mind maps. And this is not from the Pythagorean Tarot, but I don't know if you can see this at all. No, probably
No,
not.
it's
No.
going in your background.
Yeah. So anyway, it's a mind map, and I had these things that would cover the floor. You know, I'd have them, and with all of the links between them, trying to show the connections. And then I'd start color coding them. You know, ones that had to do with this topic or that topic, and then you can begin to see the organization. Oh, all of this stuff should go in a section. Oh, that section should go before this section because all of this stuff depends on that. And you can begin to see it, and then begin to write an outline or something like that. And what I did for the Plethone book, because I had sort of these inspirations and I was learning a lot of stuff, is I actually wrote a lot in notebooks. And again, I don't know how well you can see it, but it's just an old, you know, blank journal. You know, got a nice one, feels nice, good paper. That again, that's physical aspect. It's important. Is you want the book to invite itself to be written. And then I would write on various topics, sometimes just notes, sometimes what ultimately were drafts of sections of the book. And but they're all out of order, because as I was getting ideas or learning stuff, it would not necessarily be in order. But then what I did with the mind map is, in the notes, I could refer back to volumes and pages in these journals. So when it was time to write the book, I could go back and look at those sections and either basically use them as a first draft, or I could write the text that then went with the different topics. And I would have to say most of the books I've done, and even a lot of the articles, again, where I'm having some trouble sort of managing the material, getting control of the material, I've used some degree of that. And so I will combine paper, like I said, that feels good, writes well, looks nice, because that invites you to write. And but then I'm also happy to use electronic tools. I have on a tablet, little portable 7-inch tablet that I can, again, take outdoors with me, sit under a tree with it, and I can do mind mapping on it, or outlining on it, or write text, and everything's all synced through the cloud. So it's when I'm putting it together into a final book, it comes together fairly easily. So that's kind of, lots of research. When I very quickly start taking notes, because I can't hold it all in my head. I'm afraid I'm going to forget something, especially if it's some really, really neat idea. You have no idea how many hours I've spent trying to fill in a footnote where I read one little sentence that, I didn't note it down. Later I thought, oh, that's really important. And then you have to go back and figure out where you read it, what book, what page. Another nice thing is, with our electronic texts is, of course, you can highlight them. If you're going to quote a passage, you can even often copy it out of the PDF. So you don't make any mistakes copying it. And it's, it can be really, really, really handy to do that. But yeah, I take notes on these conversations. I'm just a obsessive, really, sort of note taker.
Thank you. I have a dream that one day we'll take all of these shows and use transcription software and just generate a lot of content that way. Thank you. Does anyone have anything they'd like to ask Apollonius about what he shared? Thank you. Jean-Louis, research.
I already talked a little bit about research.
Yeah.
The only thing I want to highlight are frustrations.
Okay.
And this is a kind, for me, of philosophical work, how we could manage frustrations. And what I am talking about is frustrations. We are all seeing that this is easier to find books, to find sources, and so on. Yes, but, and there are two things that are not so obvious. First, some of these books are expensive, very expensive. And I love books from scholars, and sometimes it is impossible to afford it. So this is the first challenge. This is difficult. Sometimes we can go to the library, ask for a loan for a week or something, and we can take photos and so on. This is helpful. But sometimes I cannot afford to buy the book. And the book is not beside me. Maybe this is on the other side of the country. So this is the first frustration. The second one, there are still books that are very rare, very difficult to find. And several times I had trouble to find a book. I read in a footnote something about the book, the writer saying, damn, this is essential. I must read this book. And I cannot find it. And you have sometimes one copy, and it happens when I was living in Vegas already, and I find one copy in the university. I did my master in philosophy in France, in Bordeaux, and they had one copy of this book about ancient calendars. And it was at the time I was trying to build this magical almanac and so on. But I was not going in France, and they didn't accept to send anything. So I had to wait a few months before to go and take everything in photo and come back with it. The same for Egyptian deacons. I found in Paris 3 big volumes, and they had in these volumes everything about the Egyptian deacons. Photos of the temples, explanations, everything, but 1 copy in Paris. Frustration. Yes, we can, but not when you want it. And this is frustrating. Sometimes we can. And beside that, there are, and I did to collect a lot of very small magazines published by French occultists, for example, from the 20th century, beginning of 20th century. So I have almost everything, but I am still looking at 20 because it has been published like during 20 years in the before the First War until after the Second. And this is all about Egyptian tradition, Mediterranean tradition, Pythagorean tradition, and so on. So this is exciting, but difficult to find. So even today, even with internet, we cannot find anything. And this is frustrating. So this is for me a kind of philosophical work to breathe and say, at one point I will find it, or the book will find me. I don't know, but I will find a way. And the last thing, the last frustration, and you know, I am sure you know that. If you are not self-published, but you are published by a publisher like Llewellyn or someone else, you cannot control everything. So I give you an example. In the last book about the subtle bodies, the aura, my wife and I, we draw nice representations of aura, and we plan to take photos, to use Photoshop. I know to do that very well, and to create the aura around, exercises, and so on. So we are convinced that it will be excellent to explain what we are talking about and the practices and so on. And the publisher say, too many illustrations, too many photos, too expensive, frustration again, because you want to add a few things that you are convinced that are useful for your book, but not, not for them. So we have to manage everything like that, like search for something rare or expensive, and at the same time, seeing that, yes, we built a book, but at one point, the book, we will not own it anymore. Someone else will, and they will control it. The front page, the cover, the colors of the cover, the design of the cover. Do you like it? Nice. You don't like? Doesn't matter. They know better than us. So everything, this is an interesting experience if you see that on the side of philosophical control of yourself. And to let things go. And okay, I did my best. And Tony was talking about that. At one point, I decided to stop writing the book. And after that, the publisher takes it. And that's it. You do not have anything to say.
Thank you, Jean-Louis. And does anybody have any questions or any comments regarding what Jean-Louis shared?
I wanted to mention one thing. You make a good point, Jean-Louis, about even today, these books are not necessarily easy to get a hold of all of the time. I had 2 books for my Plethone research that were not in any library, any university library in the United States. And I finally got a copy, and in French, by the way, too, I might point out. I got a copy from Canada, and it arrived, and I had it, I think I was supposed to have it for 2 weeks, I believe. And I thought, how am I going to, get everything I need out of this book in 2 weeks? And it arrived just before everything shut down for the pandemic. And so the library shut down everything else. And so they said, well, just forget it, keep it until, we open up again. So I ended up with it for a year before I was able to return it and send it back to Canada.
Thank you, Hermes.
Yes, I took that as a sign.
Anyone
Yeah,
else?
now what you say about publisher is certainly true. It is we're just one part of the process, and this is why you should be careful about picking a publisher, because their expertise is coming into it too, and on the Plethone book, what I call a Plethone book, I could not come up with a title. I mean, it was either way too long if it tried to say describe what the book was about, or it was, I felt, kind of misleading. And they came up with a title that I think was very good. And it is important in terms of marketing and all of these other things, which I really know nothing about. So this is where it becomes a cooperative enterprise where you've got specialists in book design and marketing and all of these other different things. And I've generally found the publishers I've worked with, Llewellyn in particular, you can certainly negotiate with them. If you've got a good reason for something, you can talk to them about it. And it doesn't mean you'll win, but it's I had a lot of pictures in my Plethone book too that got left out, but they were not so necessary, I think, as yours.
May I add something related to the difficulty to find something? I give you an example linked to travels. For example, when I was writing the Divine Arcana for the Untitled, it was a research coming from a church in Rimini, Italy. And I saw in some book that we had few representations of linked to the tarot, so classic tarot, in a villa. Yes, it was a palace in a city in Italy. So I found on internet few photos, but not very good, and just sections of this room, because it was a huge room. And it was not possible to have anything until I went to Italy, visited that, and took photos of everything. And sometimes you are just waiting for travel that will allow you to find more. So travels sometimes can help us also, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I never stop researching either, especially like there are a small handful of really obscure topics, like on the Phoenician Murex shell trade and topics like that have preoccupied my entire life. And I've spent decades and lots of money tracking down obscure books. And again, it's very satisfying. I made a list of things I want to do before I leave this world. And finally presenting all this information I've been gathering for a lifetime is definitely on the list. It is almost 10:15, and I know some of you had to go. So I guess we'll close with contact information, and it'll be a to be continued. And we'll start with Brandy.
BrandyWilliamsAuthor.com. And I'm Brandy Williams Author on Facebook and Instagram also.
Thank you very much. Tony.
I've got a Facebook page, a personal Facebook page, an author page, and I also have a blog on Patheos holistic spirituality, as does Brandy.
Apollonius.
Best ways to get in touch with me or see my work are through my websites. One is opsopaeus.com, and that's opsopaeus.com. And the other is wisdomofhypatia.com. It's all one word, and Hypatia is Hypatia. Thank you.
And both of your websites link to your vast library of other websites, which is awesome. Jean-Louis.
my name, debiasi.org, and Theurgy University, and I shared already the address in the chat.
Thank you all very much. This was awesome and very helpful as I wend my way through my current writing. I haven't published a book yet, but that's one of my goals for this year. So thank you. You've all been very insightful and very helpful. And thanks to anybody who watches this on YouTube. It should be up on YouTube by tomorrow. I'll send everybody a link when it is. Until next time, this is all of us wishing all of you joyous journeys and amazing adventures.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.